We're going to exercise that authority. We're going to lead our family without using punishments for when our kids mess up, because our kids are going to mess up. They are going to do wrong things. They are going to break relationship. They are going to pummel each other. They're going to be unkind. They're experience the whole range of social possibilities, especially if you have at least two, and that's part of developing and growing and learning, like, okay, this is okay and this is not okay. And we can teach our children the difference between okay and not okay without punishing them every time they mess it up and get it wrong.
Welcome to the Fresh Start Family Show. I'm your host, Wendy Snyder, powerful parenting educator and family life coach. And together we are going on a journey to help you expand your heart, learn new tools, and strengthen your family so you can build the family legacy of your dreams. I'm a mama too turned child and family advocate who went from being extremely stressed out back when my strong-willed little girl was a toddler to now thriving as a parent and having the honor to support thousands of families each year who choose to go from frazzled and impatient to peaceful and empowered. Each week, we will dive in with experts, thought leaders, authors, and advocates with insights to help you thrive in your parenting walk, as well as in your marriage and even in your career and faith walk too. Together, sometimes alone, sometimes with my better half and co-host Terry, we'll explore the triumphs and trials we all face as parents and share practical tools to fill our hearts, minds, and souls with inspiration. Take a deep breath and get ready to be poured into with some fresh start inspiration. Let's do this. Hello, families. Welcome back. I'm so happy that you are here. Today on the show, Terry and I are so thrilled to bring you Dr. David and Amanda Erickson from Flourishing Homes and Families. And my goodness, we are so excited for our friends, Amanda and Dr. David, because they have a new book out in the world called The Flourishing Family, which you're going to hear us talk about today. So that's really exciting. It's a great little book to put in as a stocking stuffer for your partner and yourself. We just love the work that they are doing over at Flourishing Homes and Families so much. But today they came on the show. This is their second time being on the Fresh Start Family Show, but they came on to talk to us about how many people battle the question or face the question, is gentle parenting aligned with the gospel? And so today we had a chat that we are calling a critical assessment to really help empower you to feel like you can face those conversations and those people who question you, whether it is your pastor's wife or a friend from college or your Bible study or maybe your mother-in-law, or who knows? There's a lot of people who feel like they have a need to question gentle parenting or positive parenting, conscious parenting, whatever you want to call it. And we really want you to feel empowered to know that the answer is absolutely yes. The gospel and positive parenting, gentle parenting, conscious parenting, they are aligned so intricately and perfectly. And there is no one better on the planet, in my opinion, to discuss this than Dr. David and Amanda Erickson. So let me tell you a little bit more about them in case you are first meeting them. They are the founders of Flourishing Homes and Families, a ministry that educates, empowers, and equips Christian parents to lead their families through parenting principles that are rooted in the teaching of Jesus. With David's background in theology and Amanda's love for child development, they're passionate about helping parents find harmony at the intersection of Jesus-centered theology and modern neuroscience. David previously served as a pastor and spent 14 years as a seminary theology professor. In 2023, he became president of Jacksonville College, where he guides the faculty and staff in preparing students to lead Jesus-centered lives that transform churches, communities, and the world. A former foster mom and pastor's wife, Amanda is an artist with a free spirit and can often be found watercolor painting, sipping coffee on her front porch swing, making up silly songs for her two boys and dogs, and hiking the woods near their home on a little farm in East Texas. So it is Christmas season, and so I just thought, what better gift to bring to you all who happen to be a family of Christian faith than really just knowing that you can be rooted in confidence. that the work you are practicing, firm and kind, connection-based, relationship-based parenting, is so in line with the gospel. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and please go support Dr. David and Amanda. Their new book is out in the world, and we just could not recommend it enough. I have gotten fully through it at this point, and it is beautiful. So enjoy this episode. We're so happy that you're here. And if you love this episode, please remember to share on social. You can tag me. I'm at Fresh Start Wendy. Make sure you tag Flourishing Homes and Families too. But we would love to cheer you on over on Instagram. I know David and Amanda are very active there. You can actually go check out Amanda's beautiful artwork that she does over on her page too. And they are always posting tips. And so if you don't follow them yet on Instagram, they are a really great follow. And then just make sure you tag me too at Fresh Start Wendy, so we can thank you for being a loyal listener. And the more you share this type of episode with the world, the more families across the planet will have that confidence that they'll know how to answer that question. Well, is gentle parenting really biblical, right? We want people to be empowered and to have that settled nervous system to be able to face that adversity and those challenging questions that will come your way if you are a Christian family and practicing this work. We just really want you to feel confident and empowered to be able to face those conversations with dignity and grace, and in a way that draws people closer to you and also helps you feel respected. So, all right, you guys, help me welcome Dr. David and Amanda to the show and enjoy this episode. Well, hello, families, and welcome back to a new episode of the Fresh Start Family Show. We're so happy you're here, and we are absolutely thrilled to have Amanda and Dr. David Erickson from Flourishing Homes and Families on the show today. Welcome to the show, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're so glad to be back.
Yes, episode number 2. Our first conversation we had was all around how we can see kids' weaknesses as strengths under construction. And it was such a cool conversation that we had. And so listeners, make sure you listen to that one too if you enjoyed today's episode. But today we're going to be talking about how is gentle parenting aligned with the gospel? And we're going to talk about ways to do a critical assessment. And that's what our conversation is going to be about today. And I chose this topic because last time we had such a great conversation, and then we keep in touch, on the web and through our crazy and wild, wonderful days. And there's, definitely been so many times where there's just been such a huge challenge of this work. And I know so many families who are called to learn and grow and bring more peace into their home through the concepts that both you and I teach and that you write about in your new book, which we're going to talk about. But they are just really challenged by people in their lives, whether it's someone that's written an article or their own mom and dad or their friends from Bible study. But the resistance and the challenge is intense for many, many people. And I just thought a beautiful conversation today where we could help just bring, I guess, peace and regulation, like give them confidence to be able to have this type of conversation with anybody who might challenge them about how peaceful or gentle or positive, whatever you want to call it, parenting is not biblical. So, yeah. So
a
amazing.
really light topic, really light topic.
Super light.
Super easy. We'll fly.
Super light.
Oh my gosh, you should have seen my back and forth with God. I was like, God, we could just do a fluffy light conversation, which I kind of feel like we did a little bit. Our first one, it was a little fluffy and light. And then I was like, okay, fine, we'll do this. And we really thought about recording this episode a long time ago, right? I remember there was a season where the attack, it felt like very attacking and intense, and we were kind of chatting and praying for each other, and we were like, let's record an episode about this. And then life lifed, and you guys wrote a book, and so now's the time. Now's the perfect time, and I do think it's going to be a beautiful, light-filled conversation. So, how about this? Will you guys start us off with just telling us, how's your hearts doing? You are in a busy season where you are moving and your book is coming out, which I've heard is just an intense but wonderful season of interviews and travel and promotion, and even just the inside emotions of, wow, we wrote a book and now we are publicly out there for everyone to give their reviews and all the things. So I'm sure there's an emotional aspect there, and you're moving into an intergenerational home. And so I know there's a lot going on for you guys. How is your heart right now? How are you doing?
I know how I'm doing.
This will be a good touch base for the both of you guys. Why don't you guys talk amongst yourselves, let each other know. Yeah.
A friend at church last night asked me the same question, and I said, we see God at work even when chaos is kind of swarming around us, and I have so much peace. And also, there is this tenderness, and aware of the vulnerability of putting our story out there. We know there's going to be pushback. We know that there's going to be quick acceptance for some. We know that it's going to change lives for some people. We know that it's going to put our own children under a little more scrutiny. And so there's a bit of tenderness and vulnerability in that. And also I just trust in the faithfulness of God, and he has proven himself trustworthy over and over again. And this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, God, it is a busy season. Like, I'm looking forward to the Christmas season. Hopefully it'll be a little slower.
You know how it is.
Nobody ever said that ever.
Yeah. And but there's enough for every day, right? There's enough of God's grace and strength for every day. And so you do what the day has for you today. And you got to leave for tomorrow. Which, that's sometimes, we're not in the trenches of 2-year-olds in diapers and things like that, but that's how that season of life is too. It's so intense and daily, and you wonder, like, okay, how am I going to get up and do this again tomorrow?
Yeah.
But there is strength for the next day. So
yeah. And I kind of knew you guys were going to answer that. So here's my question for you, is how do you feel like your expansion and growth in becoming peaceful parenting advocates and authors and growing your company? Has it been about a decade that you've been doing this? Or the boys are like 10, so maybe not that long. Is it 6 or one of the boys is 10?
We've been on our own peaceful parenting journey personally for 9 years, because we started.
Okay.
Oldest was between 1 and 1.5 is when we really started, like, something has to change. We started speaking publicly about 7 years ago, and then really it kind of snowballed when we started a public facing Facebook page, because we had just kind of done everything like personally. And that's been 5.5 years. Yep, 5.5 years.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just call it 9 years, right? That you've been expanding into this body of work and traveling with God to expand and strengthen your family and your soul and your heart in this way. How has that impacted where you stand now with your ability to have peace amongst chaos in all of your life, right? Because we know when we are entrenched and fluent in this work, it is wild how it just expands into all areas of our life. And I would love to hear just a little bit, if you could let listeners know where you guys were before, as far as, did you feel peace in not just your parenting, but in your marriage and your life and, the highs and lows of everything? And then where do you stand now as far as, and how has that impacted your life as far as the work into all areas?
That's a great question,
Wendy. Is it? Okay. Yeah. I hope that came out. It's like, I hope that makes sense.
I mean, so I would say one of the big things for us is leaning into Jesus and finding peace from him, not from the external situation going on around us. So many times we want to kind of control the situation so that the situation is peaceful so that we can have peace. And that, it doesn't work with our kids. It doesn't work with our parents. It doesn't work with our job. As much as we try to do that, it doesn't actually work. And so leaning into Christ as the source of peace and finding peace internally, so that you can face external situations, some of which are fine, peaceful, calm, and some of which are not. Like our marriage has been, a rock for 19 years now.
Yeah, 19.
And so there's so much, peace and confidence in the marriage that it's like, yeah, that's totally great.
When you included marriage in that, I was like, I can't even remember a time I didn't feel at peace in our marriage. Not one time.
Yes, us too. Us too. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I don't remember where I was going.
I'm sorry.
No, I love that. Yeah. And Amanda, how about you as far as like then versus now or
Yeah, well, I would say there's one big factor in that when our boys were preschoolers, toddlers, babies, I had severe postpartum anxiety, and that obviously impacted the lack of peace in our home. And it was internal to me, it was external. And I'm not dealing with that now. I mean,
Yeah.
there's certainly like concerns about life and these transitions and changes, but that extreme feels like everything is collapsing on top of me. That doesn't happen anymore. But also like what David said in leaning into Jesus. And I just wanted to read one verse from Philippians 4, because this verse about in Philippians 4:4-7, there's kind of these imperatives and commands like rejoice in the Lord always, and don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, make your requests known to God. And there's this tiny sentence in there that often gets forgotten because those are given us like, these are rules. You need to check these things off. Rejoice in the Lord, don't be anxious, take it to God. But then there's this tiny sentence and it says, the Lord is near. And that is like the foundation and the depth of how we can rejoice in the Lord and how we can not be anxious and how we can take our requests to the Lord is because he is near. And I think of it in like when our kids are just in chaos and a mom or dad steps in and they're like, I'm here. And they bring them in and they bring that co-regulating or non-anxious presence in and they're like, hey, I'm here with you. You're not alone. And when I was reading that last night and I read that and I was like, I want to flip it into God. Jesus is the first person saying, I am here. And so knowing that he is with us and he is not flustered and he is not standing over us as a hard taskmaster trying to make sure we do better. Like he is there with us saying, we're doing this together. You can depend on my strength when you are weak. I have compassion for you. I have love for you and I desire good for you even in this hard season.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you were describing, the way that you're looking at parenting, David, too, is like, I think is very different than I think a lot of people experience. So I think just acknowledging that too is, you're finding this space to where you are not reacting right away. And so on a very like practical standpoint, you're actually finding a space where you can find a moment with Jesus before anything else, before you're just kind of flipping the switch on whatever is going on out here in the world, because that stuff's going to always go on in some way, shape, or form. So I think that's a beautiful thing that I resonate with of like our before and after is like, I think as humans and especially, usually in the homes that we're raised in and in culture, it's like something happens and it's like, well, what are you going to do? And react quick and go. And I think that that kind of strategy, whatever you want to call it, I feel like is taking God out of the equation sometimes of like, no, actually, like you said, Amanda, like he is near. I can take all the space that I want here to act within who I am as a person, but more importantly, who I am after counseling, and praying and doing whatever I need to do. But I think so many people just miss that space. And a lot of parents, I think, just have this like, no, I have to react. And then usually then it's like, then there's a bunch of cleanup work to do because you didn't like the way you reacted, or some people just bulldoze through life and just keep reacting and never even reflect on the cleanup. But Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And I loved how I've saw you guys write in the book, which I just can't wait to hear more about that. Before we even get into our subject matter, I want you to like just talk about the book for a second. But I saw you write about nervous system regulation in the book and what's happening for so many people when they have that like panic button spike, right? And I think the work of peaceful or powerful or gentle parenting really is so much about learning to heal your nervous system and also not have the panic button go off when there is a mess, right? Because I think so many of us were raised in those like highly high control environments where the messes were not safe. So if there was a mess, if there was a misbehavior, the panic button went off, and that was a lot of times emotional and physical harm. And so it just makes so much sense why we grow up. And then we have little human souls that we're entrusted with. And when they make a mistake or are imperfect, the panic button still goes off and it just feels so unsafe, right? And so we just fear like something bad is going to happen because a lot of times it did. We were like, our nervous systems were so conditioned to believe that mess or mistake equals danger. And so I love that you guys are really just helping rewrite that narrative and bringing science into your work to help people understand what's actually happening in their bodies. And it's not like people are just choosing like, oh, I'm going to be high control and, try to like be wild, everything has to be perfectly in order person. It's just so interrelated, I think, to the environments that we were raised in. So I love that.
Microwave world, right? Like we kind of want microwave parenting where it's like, I want to respond to this in 30 seconds and get the result I want. When really like raising children is like way slow cooker, like we're not going to teach our children.
It's like a brisket.
Yeah, right. Or maybe even like cheese or wine, we're talking years.
Yeah, no, even better.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good analogy.
So, there's like this when our children are little, like there's this anxiety of like, well, if I don't teach them not to hit their brother when they're angry, like they're going to punch a hole in the wall when they're teenagers and they're probably going to commit murder, and so we have to teach the lesson now as fast as possible and program in and get the product or the result that you want 30 seconds or a minute later. And that's not how parenting works. It's not how brain wiring works. And it's not how our nervous system works. And it's also not how God works.
Yeah.
I love that term, microwave parenting. I mean, I think
that
people can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not how it works. And yet that is how it sure feels like. I'm going to say, this is not an accurate, perfect stat, but between 80 and 90% of people are taught that that grew up in the evangelical church world is that's how it works. Instant obedience is the goal. And so what a wild shift, right? That is just, if you fill it with tenderness and compassion for the journey, it's a beautiful one, and it is intense for so many because it is literally taught out the gate since you are, a very young child, that instant microwave results is the goal, right? So
you have to keep reminding yourself of that because like now, like a toddler, let's say I'm at church and a toddler does something, I'm fine. It's all good. Nothing going to bother me. But we have preteens in our home now, and so as children go through the various stages of life, they bring new stuff to you. And you got to learn how to not react to that stuff. And so it's a continual growth process for us as parents.
It's easier now. Like we are so used to recalibrating that the process of recalibrating is so much faster and smoother now.
Yeah.
That's we agree, right? We've got 13 and 16 now, and our little mellow guy, he is now like getting a little spicy. He's a little spicy in this. He's almost 14, and we're like, "Who are you?" Whereas we're used to it with our older daughter. But okay, well, we're going to get into our discussion points around how do we critically assess gentle parenting, and is it aligned with the gospel? But first off, just tee us up about this book, you guys. Oh my gosh, it's finished. It's out into the world. I have it in my hands right now. It is beautiful. And
Love
it
the art.
is, oh my gosh, the
Yeah,
cover is
cover looks great.
gorgeous. I love the size of it, everything. And just give us a synopsis of how you would describe this book and help listeners and viewers understand like why they want to go grab it.
Yeah. Well, actually, we were writing this book the last time we were on. We
Yep.
were on a writing retreat for the week.
Yep.
And I
Yeah, that's
popped in to do
right.
a podcast with y'all while we were churning
Yep.
out chapters of this book.
Yep.
Um, but I mean, our goal is to really help Jesus followers try to put as much Jesus into their parenting and into their family as they can. Like that's our big picture goal. That's what we want for parents and what we want for kids, for
Mhm.
them to learn about Jesus, not just in Sunday school, not just at family devotional time or Bible reading time, but learning about the goodness of God and in the midst of their mess ups, in the midst of mom and dad coming in a moment of discipline, that we're teaching them about Jesus through all of that.
Yeah. And so much of what it has looked like in the past is that parents would talk about Jesus and they would do the verbal instruction of teaching their children about Jesus, but then like experiencing who Jesus was didn't happen very often, and it didn't really ever happen when there were mistakes or disobedience or disrespect. And
Yeah.
when we pay attention to all of the mess around Jesus and how his disciples, didn't always do what he said and weren't living up to, the what he was calling them to, like how he responded to that is very different from how we as parents, maybe started out responding to our kids. And so that is a big part, is just like, what would it look like to parent after the way of Jesus? And then I know the second big part of it is to help parents understand that we as Christians should expect to find harmony and congruity. Is that the right word? Congruity between neuroscience and what we're learning about God's creation, humans and how they develop, and God's word, their Bible. And when we look at it together and we really understand that Jesus is the full expression of God, is that Hebrews that tell us that? And that like we learn from Jesus who God designed and created us to be as humans. And it aligns beautifully with modern neuroscience and child development and what we know about how the brain works and how it reacts to fear and how it reacts to love and attachment. That character is formed more through attachment than through will or through verbal instruction. Well, Jesus calls us to abide in him so that we can become like him. That sounds a lot like attachment.
Yeah. Parents, have you grabbed my free resource called Setting Strong Limits Cheat Sheet, where I will teach you the exact 4 steps I teach inside our signature Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint program, but just kind of the bird's eye view, so to speak, so you can peek into this process and learn more about why it works so well to influence kids, especially strong-willed ones. This free Setting Limits Cheat Sheet comes with a beautiful printable you can hang on your fridge or keep inside your car to help you get through all the drama and highs and lows that come with normal parenthood. And you can get a copy by either shooting me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Fresh Start Wendy with the word limits, or you can head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/limits now. And if it's easier and you're watching this on YouTube, you can click below in the pinned comment or via the show description to get easy access to this free resource. Enjoy. Oh,
No, that's amazing.
so
Yeah.
good.
And I mean, when I look at just purifying the message down to Jesus, like being the center of all of this, of what we can learn and carry into our lives, both our personal lives and family lives. It's like, what was his character? And, and then also relationship. So, I think the character, it's like, he's the best example of strength through humility, or that showing that vulnerability is a strength. I mean, all these things that just kind of, you know, in normal human existence rarely coexist because people want to overpower or show strength in inappropriate ways. It's like, if we're being called to be more like him in all of our, whether it's at work, at home, with the family and everything, it's like, wow, what like, that's a huge takeaway for me is he's the ultimate peacemaker. And he showed strength in so many like counterintuitive, countercultural ways that are not the ways of the world. And I think that's the big takeaway. And that's the person that I want to have a relationship with. And that's the person that I want to introduce my kids to. And that's what I want to look to, day in and day out. Because there's a lot of noise in the world, as you know, everywhere you look. That like purify it. Let's just get down to the character and the relationship for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always connected so much with you guys because you can just tell that is the center of your work. And, we have a program for Christian families called Jesus Guided Parenting, right? Because we've always just felt so called to have Jesus at the center, which, is just really like wild to navigate these days as an American Christian, because it just is like, there's so many days where I just feel so full of despair because it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of Jesus-centered Christianity happening. And so we just keep working to do what we can in our homes and our hearts to stay Jesus-centered. So I love that about your book. And I just cannot wait for every single family to read it. So, well, let's get into our subject matter about how to critically assess gentle parenting. Because again, as we said at the beginning, there are a lot of families who they feel this like gut intuition that something is wrong, right? Like we both started out our journeys. We both started out with like the classic, like feeling like we needed to control our kids. Everybody I asked just told me, just hit her. That's the way. Here's a scripture-based book. Buy this book. It'll teach you how to hit her with a switch and make sure you get control. And then, especially with the strong-willed ones, but with Stella, it was just so clear that it was not working. And my heart was just a mess. I was just in chaos, and it felt like such a long season, but it was probably, gosh, by the time she was 2, because that's really when it shows up, right? Like a lot of times. And it just did not feel right. And so we switched into a different model and felt so convicted and it's full of hope and excitement when we found out that there's a different way, which I just imagine the families who meet you for the first time or, a company like Fresh Start Family, and they're like, wait, as Christians, you can parent a child with compassion and gentleness? Like what? And then their heart just starts going boom, 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 boom. Yes, this is it. And then they learn and they start seeing these beautiful results and peace builds in their home and connection builds and cooperation builds and all these things. And then the associate pastor or the pastor's wife, or like this happens all the time in my community. The Bible study pals are like, we're concerned. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing is not biblical. And here's all the reasons why. And then the articles written by random people get put into the world that shake people to their core. I released an episode with Christina Dronin from Gentle Christian Parenting. She has a large group and following. And we recorded on the fruits of the Spirit in parenting. And one of my students, who's now in our Become a Parenting Coach program, she'll be certified in the Fresh Start Family Approach in just a few months. She's doing incredible work in the world, but her Bible study and her father called her into a meeting room because they thought she was worshiping the devil when she shared the link to Parenting with the Fruits of the Spirit. This is like a very big deal for people. And the resistance is so intense and so harsh. And it feels very aggressive. And again, it happens all the time for my people. And most of the time when I'm working in intimate environments, like private sessions with my high-level students, we are doing healing work from being raised in a high fear, high harm, emotional, physical, high control, often fundamental evangelical upraising. And it is just wild to me how much it jacks people up. And then when they go to parent this way and change their legacy, upgrade their legacy, end painful generational cycles, and truly follow Jesus in the way they parent, they're met with incredible resistance. So I want to start this off by just saying, when I looked up the definition of critical, it came to this, because it sounds very harsh, right? Like critical. And we often think of it as the negative, but the definition is expressing or involving an analysis of the merits and faults of a work. And it says literature, music, art, but let's just say it's a book or an education program or a style of parenting, right? And the example that the definition gives is she never won the critical acclaim she sought, right? Like an artist or something. So critical can be a beautiful term to really look at from an honest perspective, what's happening here, right? Like, can we trust this? Like, is it in line with the gospel? And so let's start off by just talking about the merits, right? So what is like so wonderful? And then we'll talk about faults, which really is usually perceived faults. And then we'll talk about how to trust divine guidance and your heart, when so many people have been taught not to trust their heart and that emotions are wicked and scary and, you can't trust yourself. But let's start off with this idea of the merits. And some of the things you guys cover in your book is connection at the center, respect and conflict, trust-based obedience, but what are the merits of gentle or peaceful or powerful parenting that align with the gospel?
I think we got to start with defining.
Yes.
I know one of the struggles that is out there is that gentle parenting as a phrase has no clear meaning anymore. And there are a lot of rebuttals against, is gentle parenting Christian or is gentle parenting biblical? And in all of that, there's such a lack of defining what it is or a misunderstanding of it.
Yeah.
So you want to define it, or do you,
you want to define what we're talking? Well,
what we're talking about.
I would say, so when people say gentle parenting, it's kind of like an umbrella term that in general means we're probably not spanking our kids. All right. I think that's pretty much the one thing you can definitely tell about somebody that is saying, I'm a gentle parent. And from there, it could be anybody who is like extremely permissive, almost just inattentive to their kids, to someone who is like hardcore timeouts, but they don't spank, so they're gentle parenting. And it's like, this is just all kinds of things.
That's like minimum security prison parenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, really heavy on, logical consequences that maybe aren't actually related, but they kind of make sense to the parent.
Right.
But,
yeah. And so, that it's such a broad thing. It has entered the general cultural vocabulary, and absolutely nobody has control of the narrative. Okay. So whenever I see somebody talking about gentle parenting, I'm always like, okay, I wonder what's going to happen next. You just don't know. And so the term itself has kind of become problematic. Obviously, we use the terminology peacemaker parenting. Y'all use a different terminology. Almost everyone has started picking up a slightly different term because broad term just is become kind of meaningless. But to get back to like the merits of what we're going to talk about,
non-punitive authoritative parenting. How's that?
There you go.
Okay. That work for y'all?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's so confusing for people because authoritative is different than authoritarian, right? I know when I first became a coach, I was like, man, this is confusing. You got autocratic and authoritarian in the same category of my way or the highway, high control, lots of fear and force. And then you got authoritative, which is more similar to democratic, connection, relationship-based, firm kind parenting, right?
Yeah.
So a little difference.
Because I mean, we do believe that like God has put children in this family, like these parents, and God has, set them as an authority over them, to guide them, to nurture them, to help them grow up.
Them.
And
We're
so
leaders. We're leading them.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's no shame in leading your children. Oh, I'm gonna forget her name, but she does a lot of work in toddlers. But she talks about confident leadership, and it's just how do you confidently lead your toddler out of this tantrum over to the lunch that they apparently don't want to eat? They asked for
Yeah.
5 minutes ago. And and so. I mean, we want people to take on that role, right? We're a family is not just an assemblage of four random, completely equal people in a house, okay?
Yeah.
But they're equal in worth and dignity.
They are equal in worth and
Yes.
dignity, but not all of us are developed the same way. Not all of us have same responsibilities. Not all of us can do the same kinds of things, and that's totally okay. And parents need to take on the role and the responsibility of being the parent. And so that's why we use the word authoritative. Like, yes,
Yeah.
you are the authority in your child's life, but she also said the term non-punitive, right? Like we're gonna exercise that authority. We're going to lead our family without using punishments for when our kids mess up, because our kids are going to mess up. They are going to do wrong things. They are going to break relationship. They are going to pummel each other. They're going to be unkind. They're
Yep.
going to experience the whole range of social possibilities, especially if you have at least two. And that's part of developing and growing and learning, like, okay, this is okay and this is not okay, and we can teach our children the difference between okay and not okay without punishing them every time they mess it up and get it wrong.
Yeah. I just want to add a little bit of Jesus and scripture to what he said, because I know those who are listening that are listening with a critical ear are going to be like, well, where do you get that from the Bible? And those who are listening like, yes, I agree with you, but how do I communicate this to my parents or my pastor? In Mark 10, verse 42, Jesus is talking with his disciples. And they had asked him, like, hey, who's going to sit at your right hand when when you are in all of your glory? And so they're kind of, there's a little bit of rivalry going on. They want positions of power. And it says in Mark 10:42, Jesus called them over and said to them, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles dominate them, and their men of high positions exercise power over them. But it must not be like that among you. And so when we are talking about authority as parents, our authority is not to look like the world's authority, where we're powering over and we're coercing and forcing and bringing our children you don't have a choice but to do this because I'm the parent and you have to obey my authority.
Or else you'll get hurt.
Like Jesus says, it must not be that way among you.
Yeah.
You want to take what he said seriously and obey his instruction. And so we do it a different way. We exercise authority in a different way.
Yes, which comes through trust-based obedience, connection being at the center, and respect in conflict. And what's so awesome is we both are examples of organizations and helpers who have so much data that it works.
Right.
It works so well, right? Like if you really want to model the love of Christ and have people learn how to obey, right? Like, and obey has been a term that has been, like, again, used to, like, so many people have hurt and harm around that. But like, if you really want a child to learn how to obey with true respect, then this style, these tools, these relationship-based, firm and kind, authoritative ways of leading your family, while also being willing to see that sometimes your child is actually going to teach you things that you would have never imagined. I mean, Terry and I stopped drinking alcohol a year and a half ago because Stella made a mistake as a 15-year-old. And we were like, wow, God, that was unexpected. Thank you. Thank you for the mistake our child made as a normal 15-year-old kid, and to set us on a path of realignment with you and modeling what we expect our children to do. And so it's just so powerful to know that it just works. And so for everyone who's wondering, like, just imagine if there's this way that you didn't have to hurt and harm and humiliate and force your children into submission and cooperation, but instead to lead with relationship and connection at the center and respect and conflict. That is so easy to see how Jesus did that in his lifetime, and in his teachings.
For parents, especially with younger children or who have been parenting, more exercising power over, and now they have maybe older kids, but especially with younger kids, there's not a broad imagination of what it might look like to hold a boundary with your child, without being very harsh and having to use force. And so because there is not an imagination, like they can't visualize it in their mind, they assume it can't be done. And that's, in a way, it's kind of sad because they didn't have it. Me didn't have that modeled regularly. And also because you don't know what it looks like doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And there are going to be times, especially in the younger years, like you have a boundary to hold and you are going to be the firm, confident leader who is helping your child get in the car seat because you have to be at the doctor's appointment in 25 minutes. And there's not a different option. They're getting in the car. But those overriding their need in the moment or their frustration or whatever is going on, those are few and far between when they're necessary. They're not everyday happenings of this is just the culture of our home. This is just the rhythm of our home, that you did it because I said so. And there's, I'm holding this boundary every single time, regardless. And I'm going to, drag you to your room or to the table or whatever. Like when it needs to happen, it happens because and we know that it needs to happen, but we're not doing it out of anger. We're still empathizing with them while we take them to the car. We're still telling them this is hard for you. It's also hard for me. I don't like going to the doctor either. Like we are holding compassion for them as we lead them to do the thing that needs to happen. But it's hard for some parents to understand that we are holding boundaries. We are enforcing expectations. We are leading our children towards maturity and giving them lots of practice in that because they didn't see it happen without punishments or without, harshness. And so they don't know that it can happen.
It's so true. And I'm so happy you brought that up, Amanda. Yep. And the idea of like, we still make it happen. We always do, right? And through this work, you learn to be like, open your hands a little bit so the grip is not so tight, right? So like if you are 5 minutes late to church or the doctor's appointment, you still make it happen and you prioritize teaching with respect and dignity and compassion, which in the end works so much better to get the kid next time to get in the car when it's time to be to church. And then also you bring in the strength of humility where you realize, oh, I think I'm getting the children to the car too late. Like as a 3-year-old, we should be getting to the car a half hour early and then billing in time for play and then getting there a little bit early, right? Like it's just, there's so much else that comes with it. And yes, we make it happen while also releasing that grip of control and knowing that the mess is actually safe sometimes. It is safe to be 5 minutes late, even though it feels like your nervous system is going to die when you walk in the dentist office 5 or 10 minutes late, right? And so that's such a big part of the work too.
So the holidays are upon us, and it is that magical time of year when we gather with family, embrace festive traditions, and celebrate togetherness. But let's face it, this season also brings its fair share of challenges, busy schedules, heightened expectations, and those moments when your kids test every ounce of your patience. If you are ready to trade yelling, bribing, and constant battles for a holiday season filled with more connection and calm, the Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint is here to help. This step-by-step mini course teaches you how to set strong limits that work for everyone, follow through with firm kindness, no drama required, and how to handle conflicts with confidence, creating a more peaceful family dynamic. For just $27, this gift to yourself is packed with value and takes just 1 hour to complete. Give yourself and your family the tools to tackle holiday stress with grace and connection. Just head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind to start today.
Our youngest son is autistic, and we told him that we decided in kindergarten that showing up to school regulated is more important than showing up on time. And we will always take the tardy if it means he shows up regulated. And so it is not a disrespect for you or the class. I know it can be disruptive if he comes in a little bit late. We teach him, like we've talked with him, if you do show up, like here's how to show up respectfully late, but like we're not going for perfect attendance or no tardies, because I would rather he show up regulated and ready to start his day 5 or 10 minutes late than show up on time just to get, the little sticker or whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so true. Oh,
Yeah,
I love it.
we joked a little bit at the top of the show just about like, the toddlerhood and then now preteens and teens and like some of the new things that challenge us. I mean, when we really look at it, it's like it's usually the things that keeps people from evolving their parenting or looking at things this way. It's like it's inconvenience or annoyance,
Fear of
or
embarrassment
fear of
and
embarrassment,
judgment.
which usually is wrapped up in like I think two things. It's like it's a blow to someone's ego. I think a lot of times it's the dad, I can't have a little kid talk to me and like that in front of other people, or so it's this blow to the ego and then this resistance to growth, and it's like, what would it look like if you just kind of removed that for a second? And then usually the crutch that they lean on is like, well, then I go into this and do this. God told me to do it. It's like, whoa. But what if you had more tools and you also had the motivation to say there's a long-term thing, as we were talking about like making cheese here. The long-term goal is a relationship. You grow, the kids grow. We get to know Jesus and the character of Jesus together. Not everything happens overnight. Your life becomes more rich versus this, I got to blow to my ego. I got to do this. God told me to do it. Repeat. You're right. You're wrong. It's like, I feel like the world is just so like, just wound up in this like resistance to growth and this humanness of this ego blow that it's like they'd rather fight to stay where they are than to find that they could grow into this beautiful family together.
Well, that takes us perfectly into the next one of perceived threats and, threats. Because when you're critically assessing something, you're looking at the merits, you're looking at the faults. And maybe I said threats, but faults is what I meant to say. And, talking about that like knee-jerk reaction to resist or say, this will never work, right? Let's speak to that for a minute, because I think I see one of the perceived thoughts, and you guys tell me your thoughts too, is again, some are going to go to that permissive side, right? And then, and what I wanted to say after hearing you talk, Terry, is to bring in the compassion piece of, with the clients I work with, the reason why they pendulum swing so hard as they're trying to figure out how do you do this firm and kind, autocratic, non-punitive thing is they are also a lot of times healing from so much wounds, trauma of like just being raised with fear and force their first 18 years of life. Like it makes such an impact on the nervous system that it's, so many people again swing to the permissive side because all they know is that they don't want to repeat what was done to them, and it does not feel Christ-like at all. And they're like inner compass, their moral compass, their heart, their intuition is going off, and they just don't know how to do it. And so in those moments, I think so many people swing to the permissive side, and then that gets labeled as gentle parenting and perceived like it's a perceived fault of gentle parenting, when again, you guys define that it is not, that's not what it is. That's just a human that's healing and trying to figure out how to not repeat generational cycles in their home. And how do you actually raise a child and get them to do what you want without fear and force? And we're here to say it's so possible, and Jesus showed us the way, and it takes practice. But what would you guys say about that when it comes to perceived or faults of gentle parenting? Would you agree that it's just a perceived thought, that it's permissive?
Quick nugget too,
Yeah.
and I'll let you respond. Some people will say, positive parenting, gentle parenting. Does that mean you never say no?
Oh, yeah,
And our
yeah.
response is always, actually, we say no more than most. When we look at the other families that are out there in the world that do things totally different, we actually are the ones that are holding firmer boundaries and saying no
Right.
to more things. So misconception, that's just
Take it
one
away.
take it away.
Yeah, we've noticed that too.
I mean, so some of that perception is grounded in what people have observed. They have seen parents, I
On
mean,
social media.
and they see it on social media. They have seen parents that have swung wildly permissive. That I mean, one of the things that we deal with a lot is, a parent, let's say they have been spanking and they take that out of the toolbox, like, okay, I am not going to do that anymore. I've made that decision. I'm not going to spank my 2-year-old. Okay, well, now it's the next day, and the 2-year-old just did
the thing that would have got spanking.
Yeah. And now what you gonna do? And they don't know that they're like, what am I gonna do? And so they don't know what to do, so they default to not doing anything.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I guess they'll grow out of it, which, I mean, kids do grow out of it, but also there's a reality of like, okay, that is actually developmentally normal for a 4-year-old to lie. All right. So normal for a 4-year-old to lie. Also not acceptable for a 4-year-old lying to me. Okay.
And you got to teach, and you got to teach. You always got to teach.
And so, okay, my 4-year-old just lied. So maybe I would have spanked in the past. I would have gotten spanked for that by my parents. I don't know what to do. So I default to doing nothing. And pretty quick, we are off into permissive parenting because we just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Wendy's point, I just want to make sure, like, it's very clear. Appeasement or fawn response is a trauma and stress response. So parents who swinging into that permissiveness and appeasing your children, it is like it's understandable, and there's a reason in your brain why. And also, just like a 4-year-old who's lying, we're not just not addressing it. We're not just hoping they outgrow it. Like, and also, if you find yourself in that swinging into that, it's to be expected. It is a trauma response, and there's healing, and there's hope, and there are resources to do something different so that you don't stay there.
Exactly. And I'm sure you get questions all the time in your community work that you do. And I, for sure, every week there's at least one hashtag FC done is how we do our questions. And it's like, hey, I feel like I'm being a little permissive here, and it's kind of like we as coaches, we get to help the person understand, okay, if you're, like we always say, if you feel guilty, you are guilty. So just make amends, and it's okay. Guilt is different than shame, right? Like, and so many people who were raised with the fear and force have they go to shame really fast, right? But like guilt is just like, oh, I feel like I'm not doing what I feel like I'm, air quotes, supposed to. And then they ask, like, what can I do different here, right? Because it feels a little permissive. And we get to come in and say, great question. Here you go. We want you to come back tonight before you turn on Saturday morning, before cartoons get put on. Got to teach, right? Like, how are you going to teach? What is a logical consequence that's related, respectful, teaches responsibility, and reasonable, right? Like, kind of that's the way we teach it. But it's like, it that matters, right? Like, that matters. And you're right. You have to have that visual of like, okay, I can feel it's a little off, and have the support system or a book like this to teach you. Oh, I feel the internal guidance of this feels a little permissive. And then let me get to a place, because it is part of the journey for so many people. But then the gentle parenting is not biblical articles get written. And it's like, I don't even understand, like, who the people that write these articles it's like they've never even written. And hopefully now they will read this, right? But like, it's like a lot of times you're like, it's like they've never even read or been entrenched in this work. But it's a perceived fault.
And we actually have the exact same concerns about permissive parenting. Like, what they're saying is right if they just called it permissive parenting.
Right.
And like, agree. 100%. Like, down the line, I agree with you on all of that if you said permissive. But the gentle parenting that used to have a meaning, and it used to be pretty well known, like, there's consequences. You don't rely on them. Like, they're not your main way of teaching and training.
Right.
using consequences, and they're related and they're meant to build skills and scaffold their ability. Like that's all part of what originally gentle parenting was, but now there's no clear definition. And so what they're describing and writing about is permissive parenting. And it's like they don't even know there used to be a different understanding of it. And that's so frustrating for us.
Right.
Yeah. So that's an easy kind of thing that a listener or viewer can do is someone says, oh, it's not biblical. They can say, you are so right. And what that article is actually referring to is permissive parenting. That's very different. Gentle parenting, and because the article was named that, gentle parenting is more about true strength, right? Like finding strength through vulnerability, self-control, self-regulation, emotional literacy, peaceful conflict resolution,
relationship-based.
Yeah, connection-based influence, like that's what gentle or positive or peaceful, whatever you want to call it is. But you're right? Like I think people's guards come down if you can make them right in some way. And I love that you said that. If they just labeled it permissive parenting is not biblical, we would be like, thank you for writing that article. We are on the same page. And here's what actual gentle is. So I can't believe we're coming up on time already. This is crazy to me because I could just talk to you guys. Go ahead, David.
Well, I would say two lines of critique that often get brought up. One is that gentle parenting doesn't talk about sin. Gentle parents don't believe their kids actually sin. And so they say, oh, there's somebody that's got a book called Good Inside. And there's somebody else that's got a book called No Bad Kids. So obviously these people don't believe that our kids have a sin nature. We wrote a whole chapter on that in our book about sin because
it's good.
Important that yes, it's a reality. Our kids do sin. There's a Bible word for some of that behavior. Okay, and that word is sin. And we talk about like, okay, but what does it mean? Like if my child has sinned against me, if my child sinned against their sibling or someone else, how do we handle that? Well, we handle it the exact same way we would whether we labeled it sin or not. And there's other that aren't sin. That's just developmentally normal behavior. Like your 1-year-old throwing their spaghetti on the floor. They're not defying God, okay, to do that. They're just learning gravity. Like that's just all that's going on there.
I love it.
Doesn't mean it's not annoying.
Well, and that might help the parents so much too. But like in those moments, any of us, even the most like chill parents, like that happens and you get all riled up. But if you remember something like you just said, it's like they're just learning gravity. Like that could be enough on its own to snap you out of it and be like, this is no big deal. Move on. Like stick with that's minor league stuff. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
So what? You got to clean up something. Hopefully you don't have a white couch. Bought a white couch. You might need to get rid of your white couch for toddler years. All right. Yeah.
And once you learn about compassionate discipline and natural and logical consequences and, how to teach and set firm boundaries, like you can handle the situation. So it doesn't happen as much, but you got to be empowered. You got to fill up your toolkit. You got to know what your options are. And David and Amanda's book is just one of the best ways you can do that is just read all about that. But okay, so our last point that we're going to wrap with, because we do have Terry to the
one other critique that often gets
you said it.
I want to make sure we hit it so people
yes, do it. Yes.
Is the perspective that well corporal punishment is biblical. And so spanking is biblical. Now, of course, when most people do that, they have no idea what corporal punishment in the Bible is like. I mean, we have a whole chapter on that in our book. There's a whole book. It's called Corporal Punishment in the Bible. That's like, no, this is what's actually happening when we're talking about the rod. And of course, it's nothing like what anybody is talking about when they're using the word spanking. And that disconnect between what the Bible is actually talking about and what parents or grandparents, pastors are saying, well, this is what you need to do with your kid. It's like, that's got nothing to do with what the Bible's talking about. And so, we wrote a whole chapter kind of laying that out and exposing that difference. because it's true. People have been taught to read the Bible to say, oh, well, the Bible advocates for spanking. And so to come in and look at it with fresh eyes and be like, but does it? Because that's not spanking, what the Bible is talking about. And so that's the other place where I think people get derailed on the biblical side, like, well, this isn't what you're doing isn't biblical.
Yes.
And this one's a little bit more adversarial, I might say. So maybe not the way you want to lead in.
Right.
But being like, yeah, but what you're talking about, that's not biblical either.
I
Um,
think
Yes.
this might really upset some people, but I think the really strong reaction and defense of spanking kind of reveals that people intuitively know that there is at least potential for harm. Because if we're talking about, giving your kids whole grain spaghetti noodles versus white flour spaghetti noodles, nobody is going to have a strong, like there's going to be a few people that are like, oh no, whole grain is
Yeah.
that. But like in general, the masses are not going to be like, you did it the wrong way and it absolutely has to be this way. And so I think there's such an internal drive to defend spanking because there is an understanding that the stakes are actually high for
Yeah.
it. And a lot of people don't recognize it or they aren't willing to admit that.
yeah,
Yeah. And again, it really, if we're using a compassionate lens, most likely a lot of times it is a trauma response, right? Like you see the knee-jerk defense as a way to protect yourself, right? Like the fear of criticism or being wrong is so intense for people. And, I just think I love that you spoke to that because that's probably what's underneath a lot of it is just people are really scared but yet they have no visibility about that, right? And so there is this knee-jerk defend, justify, and even aggressively make people wrong. When you really pull back, you're like, wow, this is wild. And it doesn't make sense when we're living a Jesus-centered life. And then especially once you learn how to read the scriptures and understand what they're actually talking about, which now, again, families have a really easy way to do that just by getting the book, whether it's Amazon or just requesting it from your library, right? It's going to be free. And just really preparing yourself so you understand that what the scriptures actually mean and becoming well versed. And so you can actually have a conversation on a play date to let people know, oh, hey, here's what I've learned this is actually referring to. And we could have a whole conversation just on that, right? So maybe next time we will just give ourselves the time and space to have a conversation on like, let's just dive in to the scripture piece around discipline. And I think that could really bless people. But today we've got to wrap it up, which kills me because I just want to be here with you guys all day long. But we got to get Terry to the airport. He's going to see his dad. And I want you guys to wrap it today with when it comes to following divine guidance and instead of like consistently conforming to what culture is saying. And I know so many people are like, it's the culture of the world. And what I'm speaking about here is actually culture of the church, right? Like the culture of the church that is so thick that, again, is going to come after you hard when they hear that you are now practicing compassionate discipline. I mean, my people, they get come at hard if anyone sniffs out that they have stopped spanking. But like, how do you prioritize that internal divine guidance that comes from above with your internal perfectly designed intuition and gut, right? To be able to say, I'm going to trust my heart here, even though I've been taught that it is wicked and untrustworthy and that emotions will lead me astray. And so when I feel wrong hitting my kids, I can't trust that, right? Like, how have you guys leaned into together with God, following your heart, your intuition, your moral compass, and co-creating this beautiful, peaceful parenting home with your children?
I think it's such a deep conversation to really dive into like how do you differentiate between like, is this the leading of the Holy Spirit? Is this my intuition? Is this divine wisdom? Is this my heart? And we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
But like that would be such an interesting conversation to have. But I think for
Yeah.
me, where I have found the most peace is knowing that the human body, the human brain, nervous system is resilient. God designed it to heal.
Yeah.
And I take hope in that. But more than that, I really believe that God is always graciously and abundantly at work in my heart and in my children's heart. When I am not getting it right, when I am getting it right, when I am like showing up my best, when I am showing up my worst, he is always at work. And so trusting in God's divine wisdom is also trusting in his plan to cultivate his work in my children's hearts, in spite of or despite how well I'm showing up. It isn't all about us getting it right. And if we are looking for wisdom, I'm just going to have to bring up James chapter 3 tells us that wisdom from above is first pure,
Peaceable.
then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy, full, abundant in mercy, and full and good fruits, impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness. If we are hoping our children will grow up to be righteous, it is sown in peace by those who make peace.
Love that. That's a great thing to leave people with. That's awesome.
Yes. And I mean, we clearly have many more episodes to record with you guys. So I'm going to be in your email inbox, even if it's like 6 months out. I want to schedule with you guys and we'll dig into some of those other big conversations. But for now, yes. But for now, oh my goodness, tell everyone where they can come get this book and find you guys as we tune on.
Yeah, well, of course, it's available at all major booksellers, Amazon, christianbook.com, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, wherever.
Yep. You can go to our website, flourishinghomesandfamilies.com, click on the book link at the top, and it'll take you to wherever you want to buy it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. And Instagram, because you guys are just so rock steady on Instagram with your incredible guidance and education. How about that handle?
We're at Flourishing Homes and Families on Instagram, Facebook, and technically TikTok, but you won't see us on TikTok very often. So.
Oh, we love you guys so much. Thank you for being such incredible light workers of the world. Thank you for putting Jesus front and center in your home, in your parenting, in your work. We just cherish Flourishing Homes and Families so much.
Thanks for having us again.
Hooray! You made it to the end of a Fresh Start Family Show episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you have a quick second, make sure you hit subscribe to our show so you can be updated when our new episodes drop. I will see you back soon for the next episode. All right, now is a great time to head to freshstartfamilyonline.com/firm and kind to grab the Firm and Kind Parenting Blueprint, our $27 mini course that will teach you our easy to implement yet magical in terms of results 4-step process to setting strong limits and sticking to them with consistency. Enjoy.